Hello and welcome to PMI's Uncommon Sense podcast, tools to improve your work forever. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner with PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training firm. Our Uncommon Sense podcast is a 15-minute conversation with our expert consultants. They talk a lot of common sense, although much of it is not common practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. We want you to be inspired to improve your business through learning more about the tools which can help you succeed and grow. Today, I'm joined by Sean Buckland, and we're going to talk about how to adapt voice of the customer to clearly establish voice of the business. So I think this is a really interesting topic. And when Sean phoned me to say, I'd really like to talk about this, I seized the moment. So thank you very much, Sean, for coming up with this. And I'm looking forward to this conversation hugely. Can you give us a bit of background? I know this started when you were doing a coaching call last week.
That's absolutely right. So there's a wonderful moment in the coaching process where occasionally a green belt is just going through their first green belt project, asks you something that you have to stop and really think about. However much training and coaching you've done before, this was one of those moments, because what they'd done is they'd gone off and said, right, in this particular case, my customer is X, and it was an internal customer, and that was entirely appropriate for that particular project. And they said, so I've gone and done voice of the customer with them, and what they've said is they need more staff, more time, more training, more. And I'm going, yeah, but you haven't managed to clearly define value from the customer's point of view there. You haven't really got there. So I was trying to work out in the coaching session as to what had gone wrong in the actual process. So my first instinct was that their definition of the customer was wrong. And so we went back onto the SIPOC, we looked through the SIPOC, and we found out that the customer that they were treating as the customer was in fact the operator. And what they'd done is done voice of the operator. Not voice of the customer, not even voice of the business, but voice of the operator. And what they were describing was a team of people who desperately needed their processes to be better. And from that, we were able to work it up and on. But the interesting thing that then said is, let's go back to who is the actual customer of the process, went back to the SIPOC, reconfigured the SIPOC, made sure that the right customer was there. And then a strange thing happened, and that was the coachee, the green belt, said to me, but those customers are completely happy with how things are going.
Okay.
Already. There's no point asking. They don't have a problem. The problem is in the team itself. The reason I'm running this project is to make life better for this internal people, the people who operate the process. So they are my customer. They are my customer of the project. And okay, that's really interesting. So I thought, well, how can we still keep this attached to value? So we did a bit of discussion about who the end customer is and so on, and still sticking on with that. And then we realized that they would need to interview the person in not entirely different way, but with an entirely different angle. Okay. Same tools, same skills, we need to define value, but they needed to have a slightly nuanced approach that would still allow them to get the value out. And that's how this came about. Okay,
great. Really interesting. So you talked about they need to approach this in a different way, although similar.
Yeah.
But without doing the similarities, you want to tell me a bit more about what does need to be different when you find yourself in that situation,
okay.
Would you say?
Yeah. So when we do voice the customer, what is it we're truly trying to identify? One way of summarizing that might be an explicit, operationally defined list of the things that the customer defines as value add. Operationally defined in a way that we can measure, and of those measures need to have specifications attached to them, so that we can, as a matter of fact, when we're running our processes, say without going back and checking through some form of survey or anything like that, did we or did we not meet the customer's definition of value? And it usually boils down to, as we well know, on target with minimum variation, or right first time, on time in the right format, various different languages. So we understand that's what that means. And then we could perhaps shunt slightly to voice of the business. Now, voice of the business is different because the business is concerned, yes, with delivering value, but also delivering value efficiently. So then we can start nuancing the same definition of value. I still want to do X right. I still want to do it on time, but with minimum resource, or with minimum risk to health and safety, or with maximum compliance, no rework, etc., etc. So we're using the minimum resources. So again, voice of the business is relatively straightforward. You can do standard voice of the customer and then say as efficiently as possible and as safely as possible. But when this drops then into voice of the operator's definition of value becomes absolutely personal. So of course they will focus on what's valuable to me is having enough time, having better working IT systems. They will start focusing in on the actual practical problems. So if we try and ask them what's value for them, it's easy for them to fall into wanting more.
Yes.
So exactly as happened in this situation. So what's different is we have to ask a different question. We can't ask what's value for the operator. And that's where the magic happened when we talked it through. We flipped it around and framed it in a slightly different way. What is stopping you from being able to deliver value to your customer?
Okay.
And then suddenly it comes alive again, because we still need to do voice of the customer to define value, but we then have to say, okay, now what's the situation? The situation is, I'll give you a practical worked example in a moment, but it currently takes us X amount of time. Well, how much time do you have? Not enough. Okay. So we can then operationally define the objectives for the Greenbelt, because after all, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to set the key result measures for the project. Can we set it to something useful, meaningful, measurable? And in this particular case, we were able to run it out. So the operator typically takes 8 hours to do a particular task. Because they had somebody who actually knew the process, as the Greenbelt was one of these operators, he was able to then tell me that on a typical day, they're allocated 2 hours of time for that task. So then we could say, right, voice of the operator is, what's stopping you from deliver value to the customer is this. Our current process takes 8 hours to deliver value. But the customer's happy once we've eventually done it, but we're having to work stupid hours. We need it to take 2 hours and still deliver the same value. Therefore, the result of the project is we need to take 75% of the effort out of, in this case, obviously, 8 minus 6 to get to our 75%. In this case, our objective for our Greenbelt project is to find a way to get the process to run within the available 2 hours. Not to go and buy more stuff, not to, I opened up the slide about, what to do to remove bottlenecks, overburden, Muri, whatever language you wish to use, and showed him that's your last resort. Your Greenbelt project is your first resort. Take out the waste first. But we suddenly had a clearly definable, measurable operational definition of success, and that is we can run the process in 2 hours with an objective then to remove the 75.
Because when you first talked about the sort of, the more question, I need more time, more people, more money, etc., I just felt that my initial thoughts were, slightly skeptical, trying to turn it around, what's getting in the way, the simple answer, well, I don't have enough time and I don't have enough people, so it isn't just that. It's not just turning the question round, is it? It's much more than that. It's around what are the actual operationally acceptable
Yeah.
norms and what's the reality of the operation of that, and having that data, and so getting them to focus on the performance and the goal performance. It's those
That's
two
it.
things, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's extremely well said, Suze. Yeah, because step one, by asking the question, what stands in the way of delivering value, can get that brainstorm list out, and then say, okay, what's the current state?
Yes.
What's the ideal state?
Yes.
What's the delta between the two? What's the difference between the two? And then from that, we can set some meaningful objectives.
Yes.
And of course,
yes.
the person immediately went, but that's impossible. I said, that's not the question right now. The question is where we're trying to get to. We're back into 3-question model. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish a 75% reduction in the effort it takes.
Yes.
How will we measure it? Total time. What are we going to do next to try and make an improvement? And we're back on track again.
Yes.
By doing exactly right, Suze. It's a 2-step process. First, by getting them to list what's the barriers to delivering value for them as the operator, and then doing the as is to be state, and making the assumption that the resources you've got already, because bear in mind, they're still successfully running their business. They're just outworking the problem all the time. But it tells you what the available time is or the available resource. And the same thing would be true. Let's say they'd said around training. Okay, you could say we need more training. Let's flip that around. What's stopping around? I don't understand how the process works. So what I need is a process that I naturally understand. The IT system's not fast enough. Okay, what's the impact of that? And so always we can, by just asking them what's the barrier, we can then ask, well, what's the current state, future state, ideal state that you could manage, and that if the barrier went away, and then we can frame the whole project in the light of what resource is currently available, and then we're not getting people locked into the solutions, more money, more time, more effort.
Indeed. And so often, when you're talking to people, when I'm talking to people, actually it is very much an internal business challenge that isn't directly linked to, as you say, the customer is happy. They're getting what they want and when they want it, but the work required to achieve that is not sustainable. So I think this is really, really on point, really, really interesting, and a useful way of looking at these sorts of problems with people.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sean. That's really interesting, and I hope that that's really helpful for people.
I'd hope so too.
I will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Speak soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can find more episodes of our Uncommon Sense Tools to Improve Your Work Forever in our Knowledge Hub on our website, or, of course, your favourite podcast platform. And do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to more content on this topic, which includes webinar recordings, toolbox guides, blogs, and infographics, and our training page. You can always drop us a line on team@pmi.co.uk and arrange a time to have a call to talk about how these tools can help you in your organisation. We'd really love to hear from you.